At the center of my visit here is the concern about Iran's race to a nuclear capability. Iran is becoming a nuclear threshold country. Every day that passes, every delay in the negotiations brings Iran closer to a nuclear bomb. The Iranians are clearly dragging their heels, trying to cheat the world, to continue to enrich uranium, to develop their ballistic missile program. If a terror regime is going to acquire a nuclear weapon, we must act. We must make clear that the civilized world won't allow it. Israel reserves the right to act at any given moment in any way. That is not only our right, it is also our responsibility.
We're united in the proposition that Iran cannot be allowed to acquire a nuclear weapon, and President Biden is committed to that proposition. We continue to believe that diplomacy is the most effective way to do that, but it takes two to engage in diplomacy, and we have not seen from Iran a willingness to do that.
Headliner, Al Jazeera. Israel reserves the right to act against Iran. Yair Lapid, dated October 12, 2021. Israel reserves the right to act against Iran, Israeli Foreign Minister Yair Lapid has said, suggesting that force may be necessary to stop the Iranian nuclear program. Speaking at a joint news conference in Washington, D.C., with his Emirati and US counterparts on Wednesday, Lapid said the civilized world should make it clear that Iran will not be allowed to acquire a nuclear weapon. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and I are sons of Holocaust survivors. We know there are moments when nations must use force to protect the world from evil, Lapid said. Lapid remarks came at a time when indirect talks between Washington and Tehran to revive the 2015 Iranian nuclear deal are on pause, with the Biden administration calling for negotiations to resume as soon as possible. The multilateral agreement, formerly known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or the JCPOA, saw Iran scale back its nuclear program in exchange for a lifting of sanctions against its economy. Lapid said Iranians will race to the bomb if they do not believe that the world is serious about stopping them. Israel reserves the right to act at any given moment in any way, he said. That is not only our right, it is also our responsibility. Iranian officials deny that the country is looking to build a nuclear bomb. Israel's critics often point out that the country is suspected to have its own covert nuclear arsenal, and that unlike Iran, Israel is not a party to the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. On Wednesday, Blinken reiterated the U.S. administration's support for a diplomatic path to resolve concerns about Iran's nuclear program, but he said Tehran's lack of response to Washington's calls for talks has not been encouraging. It takes two to engage in diplomacy, Blinken said, cautioning that time is running out to revive the deal. We're getting closer to a point at which returning to compliance with the JCPOA will not end and of itself recapture the benefits of the JCPOA, he added. Former U.S. President Donald Trump nixed the nuclear deal in 2018 as part of his maximum pressure strategy against Iran, under which the U.S. piled sanctions on the country. In response, the Iranian government pushed its nuclear program beyond the limits set by the agreement. The Biden administration has said it is seeking to restore the deal, but 6 rounds of talks in Vienna has failed to revive it. The negotiations have been on pause since June with the election of conservative Iran President Ibrahim Raisi. For weeks, the Biden administration has been floating the prospect of other options to address Iran's nuclear program without elaborating on what those are. On Wednesday, Blinken said the U.S. and its partners would look at every option to deal with the challenge posed by Iran. Blinken went on to say, to be very clear, Israel has the right to defend itself, and we strongly support that proposition. Iran has blamed Israel for a sabotage campaign against its nuclear program, including cyber attacks and the assassination of nuclear scientists. Jerusalem Post headliner, U.S. must provide Israel with military capabilities against Iran. Dated October 14th, 2021. As negotiations regarding Iran's nuclear program remain at a standstill, the United States should provide Israel with the military capabilities needed to prevent Iran from becoming a nuclear state, a report by the Jewish Institute for National Security of America, or JINSA. According to JINSA, a hawkish pro-Israel think tank and lobbying group whose members include former high-ranking military and security officials, 3 successive U.S. administrations have confronted Iran's nuclear and regional aggressions with only economic pressure. But to prevent Iran from continuing to project and becoming a nuclear state, Washington must do more, including developing fear and forceful additions to diplomacy with Tehran. A more assertive and concerted approach that fully enforces existing sanctions and, more importantly, enhances military readiness offers by far the best prospects for realizing the Biden administration's goal of putting Iran in a box to reduce America's exposure in the Middle East and constrain Tehran's destabilizing behaviors, the report said. Washington, which needs to take its own range of actions, including updating contingency planning to neutralize Iran's nuclear facilities and defend U.S. and allied assets against Iranian-led missile and drone threats. It must also enhance its regional posture and deploy strategy bombing and massive ordnance penetrators, bunker busters, to the Indian Ocean, boost its naval presence in the Middle East waters, and retaliate against Iranian aggression both on land and at sea. The U.S. must also strengthen Israel's ability to act on Iran, the report stressed. To do so, Washington should provide Israel with adequate stockpiles of precision-guided munitions, including Joint Direct Attack Munition, JDAMs, tail kits, and GBU-39B small diameter bombs, expedite the transfer of KC-46A aerial refueling tankers, as well as additional F-35 stealth fighter jets, CH-53K heavy lift helicopters, and fast-tracking F-15 fighter jets. With a need to keep ahead of increased threats in the Middle East, Israel's Air Force has been in talks to upgrade its aging squadrons, including fighter jets, transport helicopters, and tankers that are required for long-range missions and nearing the age of 60. In addition, the U.S. must ensure sufficiently robust air defense batteries and intercept stockpiles and expand and deepen bilateral intelligence cooperation on Iran's nuclear program and regional aggression. In a trilateral meeting between the U.S., Israel, and the United Arab Emirates on Wednesday, Secretary of State Antony Blinken warned that Washington was ready to stop the diplomatic route and is prepared to turn to other options if Iran doesn't change course. But with no diplomatic options likely to push Tehran to stop its nuclear program, Israel's military believes that the Islamic Republic needs to be aware that, should it continue with its program, it will face harsher sanctions and a true military option to stop it. In an attempt to degrade the Iranian threats, Israel has been carrying out a war between wars campaign since 2013 against Iranian and Hezbollah targets. This past year saw the most operational activity in that campaign since it began on all borders and beyond. IDF Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Aviv Kavavi told reporters in August that Israel's military is accelerating its operational plans against Iran due to the progress of the Islamic Republic's nuclear program. He went on to say the progress of the Iranian nuclear program has led the IDF to accelerate its operational plans, and the recently approved defense budget is earmarked for that. Defense Minister Benny Gantz has also warned that Israel is working to strengthen its capabilities against Iran, and if there is no deal, we are working to define what Plan B is and start other actions. Headliner from the Hindustan Times. U.S. warns of other options on Iran's nuclear program if diplomacy fails. Top U.S. diplomat Antony Blinken has hinted that force could be used if Iran does not return to the negotiation table to salvage the 2015 nuclear deal. The U.S. said Israel and the United States and Israel said Wednesday they are looking to further possible ways of dealing with Iran if Tehran does not come back in good faith to negotiations to rescue a landmark nuclear deal. Possible non-diplomatic options could include military force, but also a further tightening of sanctions or covert actions against Iran. Under the terms of the 2015 nuclear deal between Iran and several world powers, including the U.S. and Germany, Iran agreed to discontinue certain elements of its nuclear program that the West fears could lead to the development of nuclear weapons. In return for that, and for allowing comprehensive international inspections of its nuclear facilities, the country was to receive billions of dollars worth of sanctions relief. This deal has been in jeopardy since former U.S. President Donald Trump withdrew it from 2018, with Iran violating a number of the agreements it had made. Israel was not a party to the deal, which was negotiated by the administration of former U.S. President Barack Obama. Tehran has always denied it is seeking to build nuclear weapons, claiming its atomic research is for civilian purposes. So who are we to believe? Is Israel concerned about an Iranian nuclear program for which Israel itself is not privy to any type of audit regarding their nuclear stockpile, which is approximately anywhere between 80 to 100 nuclear devices, according to a whistleblower, Mordecai Vanunu. Iran, even if they did have the capabilities of building a nuclear program, would mean that it would commit suicide if it used it on Israel. And that would be for any Arab country, knowing that the full support of the West and its coalition partners would react with extreme prejudice. And so the antagonist, it seems, could be twofold, with Iranian mullahs completely at odds with an Israeli state and an Israeli government that is built on the principles of nationalism under the Likud party, which is also precipitating and inciting the Arab world with its continued aggression and oppression of its Palestinian neighbors. In 2018, it was reported that the Mossad stole nuclear secrets from a secure warehouse in Tehran in January of 2018. According to reports, the agents came in a truck semi-trailer at midnight and cut out dozens of safes with high-intensity torches and carted out 50,000 pages and 163 compact discs of memos, videos, and plans before leaving in time to make their escape. And when the guards came back in the morning at 7 a.m., they didn't know what happened. And according to the Israelis, the documents and files, which it shared with the European countries and the United States, allegedly demonstrated that the Iranian Ahmad project, which is the Ahmad project, is a Iranian scientific project started in 1989 and stopped in 2003, according to the International Atomic Agency, that is suspected by Israel to have continued, nevertheless. It demonstrated that, allegedly demonstrated, that the project was aimed to develop nuclear weapons, and that Iran had a nuclear program when it claimed that it had largely suspended it, that there were 2 nuclear sites in Iran that had been hidden from inspectors. This was followed by the Trump administration withdrawing from the JCPOA and reimposing sanctions on Iran. And shortly after retiring as the head of the Mossad, Yossi Cohn admitted he oversaw the operation to steal the Iranian documents during a televised interview in June of 2021. However, In 2015, a report named the Final Assessment of Past and Present Outstanding Issues regarding Iran's nuclear program, the International Atomic Energy Association would say that a range of activities relevant to the development of a nuclear explosive device were conducted in Iran prior to the end of 2003 as a coordinated effort. And some activities took place after 2003, but these activities did not advance beyond feasibility in scientific studies and the acquisition of certain relevant technical competencies and capabilities. The agency has no credible indications of activities in Iran relevant to the development of a nuclear explosive device after 2009. And all of a sudden, these accusations from the Israeli government, who has been an antagonist toward the Iranian government and their country, it leads one to believe what is true and what is not. With the United States acting as Israel's big brother of sorts, it seems that the US and Israel, along with Saudi Arabia, acting as also an antagonist for a completely different agenda, which is basically religious, Iran really stands no chance. But they do pose a difficult proposition for military incursions. This is not Iraq. They have a depleted standing military and were completely destroyed by two economic sanctions, one starting in 1990 and the other starting in 2002. It's how you destroy a country from within, and then you conduct a military invasion to pick and destroy and replace the pieces and force regime change, which seems to be a consistent pattern with the United States. The question is why we, the people, are allowing it.